Picture a quiet street on an early Tuesday morning. The sun has barely risen. A man in his late 50s walks out of his front door, coffee in hand, and stops for a moment beside a car parked in his driveway. It is a 1998 Toyota Camry. The paint has faded slightly at the edges. There is a small dent on the rear bumper from a parking lot accident 12 years ago that he never bothered to fix. The seats inside are worn smooth from thousands of mornings exactly like this one. His neighbors have replaced their vehicles 4, 5, sometimes 6 times since he bought this car. His own children have grown up, moved out, and bought cars of their own. But he is still here, and so is the Camry. He runs his hand briefly across the roof before getting in, the way someone might touch the shoulder of an old friend. Then he starts the engine, backs out of the driveway, and drives to work, just like he has done for 20 years. Most people watching this scene would assume something practical is happening. They would assume the man simply cannot afford a new car, or that he is being financially responsible, or that he just does not care about vehicles. But psychology tells a very different story, because when someone keeps the same car for 2 decades, the decision almost never has much to do with the car itself. People who drive the same car for 20 years exist in every country, every income bracket, and every generation. They are not a rare phenomenon. They are, in fact, far more common than modern consumer culture would suggest. What makes them fascinating is not the car, it is the choice. In a world that relentlessly pushes people toward the newest model, the latest features, and the most current technology, these individuals quietly resist. They keep driving something familiar, something worn, something deeply personal, long after the rest of the world has moved on. This behavior is not passive. It is not simply forgetting to buy a new car. People who do this make an active, ongoing decision every single year to stay with the same vehicle. When the repair bill comes, they pay it. When friends suggest upgrading, they smile and change the subject. When dealerships send them promotional offers in the mail, those letters go straight into the bin. This is a pattern of behavior that repeats itself consistently, across years and even decades. And patterns that consistent always point towards something deeper than practicality. Psychologists who study consumer behavior and personal identity have identified something interesting about people who form unusually long attachments to their possessions. These individuals tend to score high on a personality dimension known as openness to experience, combined with a strong internal sense of self. This might sound contradictory at first. Openness to experience is usually associated with curiosity and novelty seeking. But research shows that people with a secure and well-defined identity often feel less compelled to update their possessions in order to signal who they are. They already know who they are. The car is not a billboard for their identity, it is simply a part of it. There's also a concept in psychology known as object attachment theory. Psychologists have long recognized that humans form genuine emotional bonds not only with other people but with places, routines, and objects. These bonds are not signs of dysfunction, they are signs of depth. When a person keeps the same car for 20 years, they are not stuck in the past. They are demonstrating a psychological capacity for loyalty and long-term emotional investment that is increasingly rare in modern life. The car accumulates meaning over time the way a journal accumulates memories. Each scratch, each worn handle, each familiar sound becomes part of an internal emotional record that cannot be transferred to a newer model. There is a woman named Alina who lives outside of Portland, Oregon. She bought her 2001 Honda Accord when she was 32 years old, 2 weeks after accepting a job she had spent years working toward. She remembers the exact day she signed the paperwork. She remembers driving it off the lot with the windows down even though it was October and the air was cold. Over the following years, that car drove her to the hospital the night her father had a stroke. It sat in the parking lot of a church on the day she got married. It carried moving boxes when she and her husband bought their first house. It waited outside a school for years while her daughter attended classes inside. When asked why she has never replaced it, Alina pauses before answering. She says the car still runs perfectly well. She says she sees no reason to spend money unnecessarily. These are practical answers, and they are not untrue, but then she says something else. She says that getting into that car in the morning still feels like something she recognizes. That there is a comfort in it she cannot fully explain. That when everything in her life seems uncertain or overwhelming, the familiar smell and the familiar feel of that interior is something steady. Psychologists would recognize immediately what Alina is describing. She's describing what researchers call a transitional object in adult life, something external that provides internal emotional stability. The psychology behind this behavior runs through several interconnected layers. The first and most fundamental is identity continuity. Human beings have a deep psychological need to experience themselves as the same person across time. This need is so powerful that disruptions to it, such as sudden memory loss or dramatic personality change, are recognized as serious psychological crises. The objects that surround a person across many years become anchors for this sense of continuous identity. They are physical proof that the self persists. A car that has been present through graduations, relocations, relationships, losses, and victories carries a psychological weight that no new vehicle can replicate simply by being newer. The second layer is nostalgia, but not the sentimental and passive kind that word often implies. Research conducted over the past 2 decades has dramatically revised how psychologists understand nostalgia. It is not simply longing for the past. It is an active psychological resource that people use to maintain a sense of meaning and self-worth in the present. When someone drives a car they have owned for 20 years, they are not retreating from the present. They are drawing on a rich emotional history that grounds them in it. The car becomes a portable archive of lived experience. The third layer is trust. People who keep the same car for decades often describe their relationship with that vehicle in terms that sound remarkably close to how they describe their closest relationships. They know its sounds, they know its tendencies. They know what it needs and how it behaves under different conditions. This intimacy creates a level of trust that simply cannot exist with a new car. And for many people, especially those who have experienced instability, loss, or repeated change in their personal lives, that trust becomes profoundly valuable. There is a quieter community around this behavior than the one that forms around classic car restoration or motorsport culture. It does not have large organized events or dedicated online forums with hundreds of thousands of members, but it exists. Find any long-running neighborhood, any workplace with employees who have been there for decades, and there will almost always be a small group of people who have driven the same vehicle for an unusually long time. They recognize each other without needing to say much. There is a mutual understanding, a shared sense that some things are worth keeping. In recent years, social media communities dedicated to high-mileage vehicles have grown steadily. Owners share photographs when their odometers reach 200,000 miles, then 300,000, then beyond. The responses these posts generate are striking. They are not treated as curiosities or jokes. They are greeted with genuine admiration and warmth. People respond as if witnessing something they find quietly inspiring. Because in a culture that discards so much so quickly, seeing something maintained with care over many years touches something that many people feel they have lost access to. These communities are not really about cars. They are about the psychological value of commitment and the satisfaction of watching long-term investment pay off in ways that cannot be measured financially. The social dynamic within these communities also reveals something about how people respond to loyalty in general. Research in social psychology consistently shows that humans admire and trust people who demonstrate consistent long-term commitment, whether to relationships, careers, or principles. The person who has driven the same car for 20 years earns a quiet but genuine form of social respect, even if that respect is rarely stated directly. They represent something that feels increasingly rare. There is something worth sitting within the image of that man on the quiet street, touching the roof of his old Camry before another ordinary morning. The world around him has changed enormously in 20 years. Technology has transformed almost every aspect of daily life. Social structures have shifted, economic pressures have reshaped how people think about spending and ownership, and yet there is this car, still running, still trusted, still chosen. People who drive the same car for 20 years are not making a statement against progress. They are not anti-technology or indifferent to quality. Many of them are deeply engaged with the world around them in other ways. What they are doing, perhaps without ever articulating it this clearly, is insisting that some forms of value cannot be calculated in terms of features or resale price. They are demonstrating that depth of relationship, whether with people or with objects, requires time that cannot be shortcut. And they are quietly proving that in a world designed to make everything feel temporary and replaceable, some people still choose otherwise. The car is not just transportation. It never was. It is a record of a life being lived with a certain kind of intentionality. Every mile it has traveled is a mile that meant something to someone. And when that engine finally runs its last, the person who drove it for 20 years will not simply be losing a vehicle. They will be closing a chapter that no new car, no matter how advanced, could ever open again.